Good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar hosted in partnership between Identity Experts and Condatis. Today we're going to be talking about self-sovereign identity and where it sits in the new future for organizations. My name is Jason. I'm the Head of Strategy at Identity Experts. We're a Microsoft Gold partner and focus very much on delivering identity secure solutions for all the various incarnations of organizations and the unique situations they find themselves in. And joining me today is Chris from Condatis. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself and a bit about Condatis?
Thanks, Jason. Thanks so much for inviting me here today. I'm Chris Eckel, I'm CTO of Condatis, and I'll hopefully help today make SSI a bit more understandable. Condatis is an identity company, much like Identity Experts, but we focus on helping our customers with external identities, where normally identities around customer is around staff. We are helping our customers to with the identities for their customers and their partners. So very complementary to Identity Experts. We're also a Microsoft Gold partner, and we've been helping and been one of the first companies in the UK to bring this external identities technology to the market, in particular Microsoft Azure Active Directory B2C, where we help Microsoft bring this to the market. So shall we get started, Jess?
Yeah, I think that's a good time.
Okay, good. Okay, so what I'd first like to start on is explaining what it is, this self-sovereign identity, and where it comes from, and a bit about names in there. The namings of the actors that we usually deal with in identity are a bit different in self-sovereign. We have, first off, an issuer, and the issuers are the ones who give attributes into a digital wallet that the user holds. So the user, we now actually call them holder, because they have a digital wallet, and that's where they hold the identity, those digital identity attributes. And from that wallet, which is usually on a mobile device, they can then issue or share those attributes to a verifier. And verifier in all terms are digital services who need data about the users. So they can query user data, but they query that direct from the user. Now, and because of that, because of the user being in the center of all of this, this is why we call it self-sovereign. The user has a full right to share or not share the data, to hold the data, choose what they share. And we also call this decentralized identity, and that quite often will come up in names later on. So decentralized because it's all around the user. There's not a central user database, like in the traditional sense where your company has an identity server that has all the information about you, or Google has all the information about you. It's this decentralized way. So let's start with the traditional identity and the user and the identity provider. As I said, in the traditional way, the user's data is with the identity provider, and the identity provider gives the user an identifier to log in with, and quite often the user then also selects password around that. So that's like your email address or your UPN. It's your identifier that you use to authenticate against the identity provider. And then when a digital service comes into place that needs your identity, say you want to log into Flickr with your Yahoo identity, then you actually log into the identity provider, and the identity provider releases data about you to the digital service. That's how the flow is, and that's, the user is not in the center. The user only authorizes the identity provider, and that's where it's changing with the self-sovereign identity. So In the self-sovereign way, we set the user, we call it holder because they have this digital wallet, and a bit like the wallet in your pocket that has those identity attributes in there. And the issuer knows the user well. You know, that could be your company you're working with, or the government where you're a citizen. And because they know you, they can issue a credential to you. And that could be your staff passport or your citizen identifier or citizen ID card. That gets issued, and you hold a copy of this issued, signed by the issuer, a copy of that credential in your digital wallet on your mobile device. And then when a digital service comes into play, a verifier, they can, when you want to use them, issue a proof request to you as a user, and you say, yeah, I want to deal with this verifier, and therefore I will want to release some of that data that I hold on my credential to that verifier. And that data is released. Actually, you're not sending the actual credential, you're sending a representation to that answer, to that proof request. You issue a proof to that verifier. Now, under the hood, to make this happen, there is a further component that needs to be there, which are labeled here DLT, so a distributed ledger technology. That could be a blockchain, that could be other digital ledger technologies. And to enable this, the issuer in step number 0 publishes their key that they use to sign this credential to the ledger, and the verifier, based on the proof, loads the relevant key back into the system and then verifies the proof. So that's where the digital ledger come in. It's basically something that's immutable. It's not just on one machine. It's distributed as ledgers are, and can't be changed. So a key published there will always be there. I'd like to also explain how, when a transaction happens between two entities, so whether that's the issuer and the holder, or the holder and the verifier, if those transactions happen, those transactions are based on a good crypto basis. So the issuer and the holder both have a wallet, a digital wallet, and in that wallet, when you set up the wallet, a key gets created. That's your private key that never leaves the wallet. You can back it up on paper or in another file, but it's a private key that belongs to you and never shared with anybody. And based on that key, there's a public key, and those are the master keys. Very private to that entity, whether that's issuer, holder, verifier, they all have keys. And to enable communication between two of those entities, you actually derive a key specific to this transaction. So specific to this connection or transaction, you would derive a private key for this transaction that has a public key as well. And then via standard secure key exchange algorithms, those keys get sent to the other party. And along with the key, we also send the addresses to address the other party. So an address that allows us to speak, and a key that allows us to secure and encrypt that communication. So that happens both sides. And that set of data we are sharing, we're actually calling DID documents. So DID stands for Decentralized Identifier, and it's a W3C standard. And that DID document describes that public key that's shared together with the addresses to connect to each other. And by sharing that, we then have a secure tunnel over a public network that allows encrypted communication forth and back. Jason, to compare this with the traditional joiner, mover, leaver scenarios, we have a diagram here that shows the traditional way.
Yeah. So if you think about the current way that we do most of our user provisioning, it's very system centric. So a new starter might join the company, they're added into HR, and at that point the machinery kicks in and kind of takes over. So the IDM, whether that's MIM or one of the other platforms available, kicks in and says, right, what does this user need according to some rules which have been defined in the system? And we'll create an Active Directory account, and we'll create potentially entries in things like door pass systems, line of business, and through extension tooling such as Azure AD Connect or the Google equivalents, that will then create cloud identities on the back of that. But the user themselves is subject to the system, whereas the system itself is paramount, which is why the IDM's there in the middle. It's sat there, it's got its connectors out into the rest of the world, and is controlling the universe.
And I think this is where the main change of thinking happens, because if you look in an SSI joiner scenario, you actually put that user into the center. So the user gets a staff passport or some credential that represents the entitlements they have, and from there they can interact with the different systems, whether that's a door access system, whether that's Active Directory to get into my line of business or Office 365, or whether that's HR actually dealing with that passport, either issuing it or revoking it or giving you a new role because you've been promoted. So underlying all of this and enabling that digital wallet really is a technology, our data model we call verifiable credential. And that's a standard that's now a live standard. It describes the crypto, the provenance, the integrity. It describes how it can be used to don't track information across entities, but it also allows things like called zero knowledge proof. So I can derive information out of a verifiable credential with those proof requests and proofs that come out that just give a part of the credential that still has the information or all the provenance of the original credential. So I can ask a wallet, does this user have a valid UK driving license with an entitlement of A, B, or C, or whatever it is, and the wallet would just answer yes, and you could prove that this yes is good enough to give you a rental car. So I guess it's important to look at how is this trust model different from the traditional identity. So traditional, in the federated sense, is the user and identity provider. If I look at my AAD, I trust each other. AAD has given me some keys, an authenticate app, a multi-factor, whatever, to authenticate. There's a strong trust relationship. And between the digital service and AD is also a very strong trust relationship. The AD needs to be sure the data it's issuing about the user is going to the party who was authorized. So your data, your role information, your entitlement, your name, your date of birth, your image shouldn't go to a rogue digital service. It should end up where it needs to be. So it's a very strong two-way trust relationship. And that results, obviously, that the user has this strong two-way trust. Now, we always need this user to relying party to service trust in both ways. The user needs to be happy with the relying party, and the relying party needs to be happy that this is the right user at the other end of the computer. So how do we do the same model in SSI? In SSI, again, to issue a passport or a credential, I need to know who the user is. So that's a strong relationship with my HR department, with my government. They have a strong relationship that, oh yeah, this is Chris, I can issue him a staff passport that he's a CTO of some company. And that issuing happens, as we've seen earlier, with this key exchange. So there's a peer-to-peer connection between the issuer and my digital wallet, and therefore they issue me a verifiable credential. So VC stands for verifiable credential. Between the verifier and the issuer, however, they don't really talk to each other. So the verifier needs to know which issuers it can trust. So do I trust my HR department? Do I trust my government? You know, which governments do I trust? It's a bit like turning up in border control and they look at your passport. They will know which passports they can trust and which passport needs some extra examination. And again, so the trust is one-sided, with a trust list on the verifier, but it's also by the issuer publishing their public key so anybody can verify documents they issued, verifiable credentials they issued. So if you have this one-way trust only, on the lower edge of this triangle between the verifier and the issuer, we need to bring in some other trust mechanisms. The holder is willing to share. I recognize this is somebody with a cap and some signs on, this border control person. I think I trust him to hand over my passport. And because the border control agent says, well, I trust this government's signature, therefore I can extend the trust to this user and let him in. So the trust model is a bit different, but it's a significant thing between the issuer and a significant difference between the issuer and the verifier. And the difference is on that usage of the credential. So I have a credential in my digital wallet, and every time I do this proof requests and issues of proof, what happens is the verifier loads that verifies the proof, but at no stage the verifier calls back to the issuer. So the issuer is totally blind to me using my credentials. A bit like my passport, the border control agent in Timbuktu will not call UK government and say, hey, have you signed this passport? They will, however, check public revocation lists, but they will not call the government for every passport. So the government's not aware of my movement from Congo to Timbuktu, but they can revoke my passport. There's two major technologies that are currently in the market that support this new technology. One is a technology stack called Hyperledger Indy, and the other one is a technology stack that by name we know well. It's OpenID Connect, and there's an extension called Self-Issued OpenID Provider, SEOP. And both those technology stacks are different, but they also use similar components. The component they all use is this data model of verifiable credentials. So this whole model of being able to attest something to a holder, it can sit there and the holder can issue proofs of it. That's the same. In Hyperledger Indy, this where it's different is the communication level. And the communication level in Hyperledger Indy is based on connections between those entities, whereas in SEOP, it's a bit more connectionless, because like in federated identity, you can just issue a request and get a response. So the whole dance around keys is all embedded in a simpler connection-less model. Hyperledger Indy, the big companies to watch there is Evonim, IBM, Trinsic. In the SEOP world, it's the big company to watch for is Microsoft, and they have, you might have seen on YouTube or in Build, that they've published the way of forward thinking in this mode, and they already are running private previews on their model. Hyperledger Indy, the companies involved, they already have products that are in general availability and in production. So I think next I wanted to speak a bit about, how does it look in reality, use cases, to make it a bit more visual. And the use cases is coming back to staff passport. So I'm part of a company, but I want this passport. So how do I get it? So you can get it as simple as going to a company portal and saying, hey, I'm logged in with my company credentials in my normal company way internally. Give me a staff passport so I can use it with another organization. And I can download it onto my digital device and I get it. But you could even imagine the scenario that you get the digital staff passport as part of enrollment. So first day you're there, HR checks you out. We hired you, might do a passport identity check, whatever, and then give your digital staff passport without even giving you any other credentials, because in the future we might not need a username password at all. It could all be based around this. And then the usage of that is at a reception and just getting into a building, getting onto the right floor, getting through a door, or logging into systems. So, for example, at reception, it could be a shared office building where there's a security service that is independent of my organization even. And all they do is they have a mobile verification agent on their mobile device, doesn't even need to be connected to their IT system. They query for a proof request, and I would accept that connection for the query, and I would issue my Condatis staff passport and just the attribute, yeah, I work for Condatis, and I'm allowed to go on the third floor. And all the security agent would get is maybe my picture, so they can do a visual check, but no name, no date of birth, no rank or title, just that I'm allowed to go in the third floor. Easy use case, no big integrated IT, all decentralized. And another possible use case is once I get onto the third floor, well, I find a computer, in kiosk mode in effect, and there's a QR code on the computer. I scan the QR code, say, yeah, I'm an architect. I need to go into this architectural program. I release my role and that I work for this company to the service out of my mobile device, out of my digital wallet, and have access into the service. No username and password needed anymore, just my assignment. You could also think about the more citizen approach way, on an airport, how often why do I need a passport to fly nationally? So I'm Jess is at the airport check-in. She has now, UK has already issued digital passport. It's in my wallet. And all she shares is the relevant information for the advanced passenger information forms. And the clerk on the desk might even get a biometric check with the camera on the check-in desk and verifies that this is the right passenger. Another, I can take it further. That there's offline examples as well. Obviously, I could have Amira at home trying to sign up for a loan and needing to prove that she works for a company and earns a certain amount of money. Again, even offline, via the bank's website, during the loan application, she scans a QR code, says, yeah, work for Identity Experts, earn this amount of money, and she gets her loan. So this wallet really, as I said, it is replacing username and passwords nearly. You could think about it in a way of authentication just with a wallet. And specifically, if you've done it once, there is a simple way, because we exchange keys at that stage with what we call a connection redirect, or sometimes, there's a protocol name for it as well, DDoS. Just by turning up with the same wallet again, you can bind it a bit like you can bind something to a social identity like Google. If I turn up with the same Google ID, yeah, it lets me into my account again. So that's fine. You can even, because you have a strict connection between the two agents, the verifier and the wallet, during a phone call with the call center, say you phone your bank, and the bank used your SSI before, they could, via this connection, send you some questions, some security questions that you answer in your wallet, and they could verify because they know only you have this connection. Or then your proper authentication way with attributes really is using some attributes in your credentials, like an attribute of my role as an architect or as a CTO or as a sysadmin. I issue that to a verifier, to a digital service, and they can validate that. And they know that, yes, if that's been issued by company A, B, or C, we accept this. And there's a whole yellow box around this with revocation. As I said, like a government passport, there is a ledger public revocation list of credential serials that have been revoked. And that's really all it is. It's serials of credentials that are revoked. And as an organization, you can even be as complex as, yes, do you have a passport from organization A? And do you have training from this college as such and such? And did you have a recent health and safety training on this technology? And when all of this comes together, in one proof request, I can actually ask information out of 1, 2, 3, many different credentials, validate that as one trust framework, and give system access or building access or entitlement access based on that. And I've mentioned in there also this what we call OIDC bridge, and I'll get to this in a second, because it's what we are help Condatis. What we've done is we've encapsulated this new technology, this SSI technology, for organizations who have existing federated identity models, so who have digital services for their staff, for their external users that speak OpenID Connect or YAML, and from those services don't need to learn this new technology. We can just bridge this for this organization, encapsulate their trust framework, and do on the left-hand side that issuer wallet. And instead of the verifier, we have the bridge. So the bridge acts as an organizational verifier to the organization's relying party. So the same dance happens, but instead of logging in with a user and password in that relying party, you get redirected to a page with a QR code, and that QR code then, or an SMS to your wallet, and from your wallet you then answer the proof request with a proof, and you can get into the relying party. And that bridge has a branding in there, so you can make it sure it looks like your organization should look like. It has monitoring, configuration, and can be used for a number of use cases within an organization. And I guess thanks for inviting Jason, because this is where Condatis use cases are. We are dealing with external identities, and as part of that, we do a lot with SSI. We've built a tool kit for SSI to help organizations try this new technology. We have this bridge, verifies issuers, and actually allow not just with Hyperledger, and now we are partnering with Evanim there, but also with Microsoft or other SSI providers to interop between those. I guess this is a bit of an overview of where I see SSI, and I hope that is useful. Maybe, Jason, what are we thinking?
Yeah, so I think for me, coming very much from the traditional, in inverted commas, identity world, so I think you're coming at it from opposite direction to Condatis and the journey that you've been on. I am looking at it in terms of, well, actually, there's lots of interesting things here in terms of being able to say, well, actually, because I can now slice up different bits of the access model. So I can say, actually, this person is a cleaner or a security guard or a caterer. They've got no IT footprint at all, but they do need access to the building. I can now offload that to self-service identity, self-sovereign identity. HR or my contract partner has done the legwork. All I need to do is trust that they've done their job properly. And all of a sudden, that's a whole load of pain goes away. Similarly, in terms of things like zero trust, I'm thinking this is where there is an opportunity here for, not so much the customer facing identity, but actually being able to say, well, actually, I can now verify more things about this person. So yes, they've got a username and a password they can authenticate, but I can also then check in real time to say they are asserting that they work at this organization. I can check that now. So it allows us to take a much stronger posture for zero trust authorization, in particular authorization. If you've got a sensitive application, traditionally we control that with access. So we create an account, we put the account into a group. Now we can do all of that and put additional layers over the top, which means we can put additional security in place. But, and I think this is, for me, is the killer app part about it, the end user doesn't need to know. They don't need to see it. They probably won't even be aware 90% of this is moving around in the background. They're showing up at a kiosk. They are authenticating themselves using a traditional credential alongside their passport or their wallet. And then they've got access to these highly secured systems without having to go to a lot of trouble. And I think today this is where bring your own device caused a lot of change. And I think as people get more and more interested in this themselves, because it offers them personal benefits, we'll start to see in the enterprise world, bring your own identity backed onto this, because the user will expect that level of experience.
Yeah, and it is the ultimate bring your own identity, because in the traditional sense we've been using this for a while now, bring your own identity, but we always thought that, oh well, you can choose whether you use Google or Facebook or whatever, but that's not bring your own identity. Bring your own identity is I bring my own key. I'm not relying on a Facebook identity, and I'm in full control. So this is where the model really changes.
Oh, absolutely, because it's one of those things. You show up, you've got your Facebook identity. A, do you want to share that? B, what happens if something goes wrong and your account gets compromised, stolen, closed? Facebook decide that your hobby is now forbidden, and so you end up with a 28-day ban. Does that prevent you getting into your bank account? Whereas at least this, because it is under your control, you can show up and say, actually, I am who I am claiming to be, which is the authentication part. We know who this person is, and we can do that reliably without compromising anybody.
Mm-hmm. And then there's an interesting question I just popped up, because it was around, we were talking about those services, but it comes back to physical things. So this was around with non-inductive systems, for example, door port scanners, so I can swipe through, or and that's really where it is. So you've seen on the diagrams, you can read a QR code, so you can actually put a QR code on a door, and the QR code really encapsulates a proof request. So it says, do you have access? you have some credential that allows you access to this door.
Yeah.
And then behind this, in a traditional door access system, it would check that your key fob was onboarded before. But rather than your key fob being onboarded, the system now gets a proof that states, I work for Condatis, I have a valid contract, I have right to get into this room, and then the system can release the magnet and let me through the door. So that is absolutely possible.
Oh,
think about,
and I think
about it.
Sorry, go on.
No, gym membership, that's temporary in effect. It expires, and in effect, rather than taking door fobs off my access control list every day of the people who expired, I really only deal with the people who have the right thing in their wallet.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, again, this is where being able to really focus that trust relationship comes into it. So, using a door example, you could say, well, this person's a shift worker. I would expect to see them showing up at 6 o'clock in the afternoon and working through till 2 in the morning. But if they appear at the door at 10 o'clock in the morning, we don't need to let them in because they shouldn't be here. But equally, we can also apply that kind of thing to our, using that exact same logic, that exact same set of policy decisions. We can also apply that to our applications. So if somebody is showing up and trying to access the super secure documents vault at 4 in the morning, is that really correct? Would we normally allow that, or should we be using that as an additional layer in our zero trust to be able to say, actually, we just don't think this is right, we're not coming in? It gives us those movable levers to be able to say, actually, we can start doing some very interesting work here.
Yeah. What other questions do we have?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that was popped up is around revocation and updates. So obviously, if somebody shows up, we don't really want them in the building anymore, so we want to revoke their access, or we've incorrectly issued a certification, but the person who holds that has now left the building. They've wandered off with their wallet with that assertion in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, remember how I said we never call back to the identity provider, really? The verifier never calls back to the identity provider, but to the issue, in effect. There is this special thing. So the issuer, when they want to revoke an identity, they can actually put that on a revoke list, and the revoke list is just an extension to that blockchain type storage, something that is just permanent, and I write the serial number of that credential I want to revoke onto the revoke list within the blockchain. And so on the validation, it'll come, oh yeah, this is a proof that's been issued by an issuer, but it has been revoked. It's on the validation engine, the revoke will kick in and will just list this as a revoked credential, and therefore you can't get in. And the other thing is, I spoke about this secure connection between two agents. So for example, the issuer and the holder. So say you have went away and you realize they gave me the wrong bloody role in my staff passport, and you phone back to HR and say, well, actually, I'm a senior guy, not just a junior developer. Yeah. So the HR department, based on that existing connection to your wallet, can send an update to the credential. It'll ping in your wallet. You need to accept it because it's your wallet. It's still self-sovereign,
Yeah.
you accept in your wallet, it pings, and you have a new credential with that updated data in there. So that's one of the advantage of having those connection-based protocols that allows full communication between the entities, whether that's between that. The other also applies is you shared your credential with a relying party, with a verifier before, but now you have a new role and you want to share this new one, or the verifier over an existing connection asks for, hey, do you still have this? So the connection is there. I can just ask, hey, you shared this with me before. Is there any update on that credential? Again, you will be pinged, but you don't need to scan the QR code every time.
Yeah, so again, it's doing that. We know who you are. We're just going to verify some details on there.
Yeah.
Okay. I think there's one in here. Is this just another form of multi-factor with some extra party tricks? Which I think it's a good question. It's an interesting one because it does lead into, this is very authentication focused, if you like. But it does also offer us the ability to say, actually, we can do more. We are saying, are you who you claim to be? But then we can go further to say, and do you have these other properties as well?
Yeah, exactly. As you saw in that authentication slide, it is a nice party trick, but the party trick is around a wallet. So the user holds the key. It's very, on the authentication level, it's very comparable to those FIDO2 keys, where I bring along a hardware key that has a public-private key pair inside, and that hardware key gets onboarded, saved to AAD, to my Azure Active Directory. However, the hardware key is a static key, and it's always the same wherever I onboard.
Yeah.
With the digital wallet, it's actually a derived key. So every communication I have, whether it's with one Active Directory or with another Active Directory, I'm using a different key. So my privacy is far more protected. This do not track comes in very strongly because of that technology level, because the FIDO hardware key only has one key. It can't derive 15 keys for each of my connections. It's always the same signature. Where on the digital wallet, I have derived keys that are very specific, transaction specific, and therefore protects my privacy far more.
Yeah, so just because I've got hold of one of your keys, that doesn't tell me anything about any of the others.
Oh, and where I use the others, exactly.
Exactly, yeah, definitely. Cool. I think one of the other things just popped in is there's been a question about B2B and partner organizations. So obviously in a traditional B2B scenario, you've got this management overhead somewhere along the lines where somebody has got to say, these are the people who we are going to allow onto our system. And then somebody's then got to manage those accounts. So they've got to send out the invites and the like. So how does an SSI approach work in that sort of scenario?
There's actually a good example in Canada with British Columbia government. I think they call it secure entry, secure access, secure entry. And then you can read that up. I'll post that afterwards. It's based on Hyperledger as well. And what they do is they looked at this COVID use case is, how do I make sure that only the right people have access to a building of a cleaning company? So not my own company, but a supplier to me. How do I onboard this? How do I onboard the cleaning company? So I trust the cleaning company as an issuer, and then the cleaning company can issue their own staff passport to their staff, and they can even, say somebody in the cleaning company can say, oh, you have access to client A and you have access to client B. So it could be as granular as that.
Yeah.
And that's obviously part of that. You could extend that, however, that's the normal B2B use case. I'm delegating it to somebody in another company. They can do the invites. issue a passport. What about if I extend it to a health status? You know, right now everybody is really aware of. Do you have, you know, we know this COVID immunization status isn't there yet, or whether you had it, whether you're now immune or not. But say that works, and say you have a test that you had it and you now have some immunity for a few months on it. That could be another credential issued by a public health organization that is also part of it. So when the cleaner rocks up at the building to clean, the entry system could ask for, yes, are you allowed to clean, and do you have a clear bill of health at the same time? Only then you can get in, to avoid contamination of the office space.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're not asking at all, but no access to any personal details, no medical records. It's pure that derived value.
Yeah.
You know, have you recently suffered from or not suffered from that particular virus?
Yeah, yeah, and obviously, as we know, World Health Organization, there is actually a paper immunization passport out there. This yellow one for yellow fever. You know, right, yeah. I think maybe next year, if there's a good vaccination and it works and it's all proven, maybe they start issuing, instead of paper passports to everybody, they issue verifiable credentials of around a vaccination status. You know, and vaccination is well described as a data set. You know, in the healthcare sector, we deal a lot in the healthcare sector. Vaccination is a good described data model, and no reason why that couldn't be a verifiable credential within your digital wallet, and allows you entry. Or, you know, I've recently had to travel back to the UK and had to self-isolate. You know, that's, you know, maybe I wouldn't have needed to isolate if I had been able to show a border control agent my vaccination status, if I had it at that stage.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And again, it's all done under your control. So if you choose not to share that with the local coffee shop, that's fine.
Yes.
Not that I'm remotely bitter about my last trip to Costa's.
Can you go again?
Yes, it seems that we can, but you get interrogated.
Oh wow. Well, see, this is one of the things. How does those shops that need to keep record of the users, the visitors in shops right now, to potentially, you know, whatever, for 14 days, could you, you know, if you're willing to share that electronically?
Absolutely. And I think one of the live use cases at the minute is around things like mask wearing. You know, I happen to be in a protected category where I'm not obliged to wear a mask, but I don't have any paperwork to demonstrate that. And, you know, I don't really see the value in showing up at my GP surgery and saying, can I have a letter from that thing that you diagnosed 15 years ago? You know, I'm pretty sure he's got better things to be doing. But again, being able to do that, as you said, the derived values. Is this person obliged to wear the mask? Yes, no. Then, you know, that at least gives people the you know, the air cover that they need to feel confident going out to places.
Yeah. Good.
Cool.
Any more? I think we're at the.
No, I think we've gone through all the questions. Obviously, if anybody thinks of anything after the webinar, please feel free to get in touch. Both Chris and myself will be delighted to answer any questions that show up. And thank everybody. Just like to thank everybody for attending, and Chris putting on a really interesting and valuable presentation for us.
thanks for having us. You know, it's great to talk about this, because I'm really passionate that this will change our identity world as we know it. You know, because it decentralization is a pattern that will help IT in the future, and we've always seen that in some other areas, and now we see it in identity.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it gives us an opportunity to look at new ways of working, new controls we can apply. And it also means we are going to have to grow up as you know, from my perspective, where I've got an iron grip on Active Directory, being able to say, actually, I can release that now. It's actually not my job to have that strong grip. People know who they are, people know who they trust, and we can move into a language of trust rather than accounts. Do we trust this person? Yes, no. What do we trust them? When do we trust them? Rather than it being very, very account and system centric.
It's all about the user. Well, thanks for having me, Jason.
Oh, pleasure as always.